2-year-old sales are right around the corner, so we're going to jump into what to look for and what not to. So, first and foremost, let's get this out of the way so we can get into the meat of this video. We're going to talk about what is the biggest misnomer in 2-year-old sales to start this off, and that is time. Everybody at the 2-year-old sales gets too hung up on how fast those horses go. It's not about them going 9-4 or 10-2. It's about how efficiently they did it. If you had a horse that went 9-4 and was smooth as silk, that's a really good horse, potentially, especially if they gallop out well. If you have a horse that went 10-2 and did it efficiently, that's still a good horse. The biggest thing, though, that I see is people come up and say, wow, look how good that horse was. It went 9-4. And when I go back and look at it, the horse looked horrible doing it. What you are looking for at a 2-year-old sale is you are trying to find athletes. None of these horses will ever go 9-4 again in their life. They'll never do 10-2 again in their life. They will be more than likely going 11 and change at different distances. And if they're a 2-turn horse, they're going to go 12 and change. That's just the norm of how it'll be in racing. So when you go to a 2-year-old sale, don't get overexcited if the horse put up a massive breeze time. Look at how they did it. And what I mean by that, if you watch these videos, good horses look like they are always in control when they are going fast. They look very efficient. They look very smooth. There doesn't seem to be a ton of wasted action. If there is a ton of wasted action, it can mean a multitude of things. But if the horse went 9-4 with a ton of wasted action and the jock hit him 6 times, well, then that horse was really pushed to do 9-4, and it can't actually really do those times. So I personally steer clear of horses that have issues at 2-year-old sales. Sometimes some people will say, well, you're pushing on them so early. If you didn't push on them that much, then it's not going to happen, or you can back off and this will fix itself, and so on and so forth. I don't buy 2-year-olds with issues. For the amount of money you have to spend to get a good horse at a 2-year-old sale, you want to try and get as clean a horse as possible. Shins is, if there's a horse at a 2-year-old sale with buck shins, it's more than likely going to buck shins again in training. It's just a given. They cannot hold up to training. So the biggest thing at 2-year-old sales, why I avoid these horses, is they're not fully being pushed to what we will be pushing them to do once they step into race training. Because after you come out of these 2-year-old sales, you then have to start breezing once a week at exceedingly longer distances to get fit to race. If you cannot hold up to even doing some of the smaller, quicker breezes that they're doing at 2-year-old sales, you're going to have a hard time getting up to half a mile, to getting up to 5/8, to getting up to the workload that we need to get you in the starting gate to have your debut. Once a horse makes its debut, then the training scales back. It's more maintenance mode, but you have to build these horses during a period of time to get them ready to run. And if you cannot build them by pushing them through those stages because they have soundness issues as a baby, you're more than likely going to end up with a horse that can't make it to the starting gate. When you buy a horse out of a 2-year-old sale, typically what I would say is don't get over anxious as an owner. Give yourself 3 months. Okay, 3 months minimum, because what these horses need to do, some of them are perfectly fine and they go right into a training scenario and they go onwards and they keep going on an onward trajectory to make a race. Most of the time you have to take one step backwards and you have to let that horse acclimate into a full training environment. So that takes time. It's not about necessarily joints or issues that horse might have incurred at that sale. It's more or less getting used to the sights and sounds of the racetrack, which is going to be pretty different from what they've experienced in Ocala or wherever they were broke in the United States, because there's not the horse population on those racetracks that they will encounter on American racetracks. So as you get these horses going forward, you have to acclimate them to the new track, not just sights and sounds, but actually the surface itself. Every surface is different. No matter how similar you make it or try to make it, they're all different around the country. And when you put a horse on a new surface, it typically takes them 30 days for joints ligaments and tendons to acclimate to that new surface. So you typically want to back off, continue training them, let them get used to the surface, do a couple easy works over that surface once they've mentally acclimated to that environment. And then once you have them in a rhythm, then you can start pressing on getting them ready for the races. So I always tell people, don't expect to buy it in March and run it in April, run it in May. Plan on June, July. You're going to need at least 3 months to get that horse to be prepared, to be ready for the races. So, and some horses take longer. So it's just understanding what each individual horse needs, but plan on 3 months of expenses before you're even close to making a debut. When you're buying a horse, you're buying it for a specific reason. So a horse having a great 1 furlong, 2 furlong work, if you're looking for 2-turn dirt horses, if that horse is built to be a sprinter, well, then you just have to accept that you're going to buy a horse that's a sprinter. Things that might put me off when I go look at a horse. As I said, when these horses get into a training environment, the stress that is placed on them to make it to the races is far more than they receive when they're getting ready for a 2-year-old sale. So they have to have a confirmation that I feel will hold up to that rigors of racing and training for racing to make it out the other side. So we can be 100% honest here. There's a lot of horses that don't make it to the races. There's a lot of yearlings that don't make it through a 2-year-old sale until some make it through a late 2-year-old sale. There's a lot of 2-year-olds that come out of the 2-year-old sales that don't make it to the races. A lot of people want to say, well, the 2-year-olds out of the 2-year-old sales don't make it to the races because the 2-year-old sales are so hard on them that they can't come back from it. That's not necessarily true. It depends on who's consigning. It depends on who's prepping. There's a lot of phenomenal people out there that do a great job. That those horses go onward no problem. It's down to the individual athlete. And there's a lot of horses that just aren't meant to make it to the next stage. They don't have the proper confirmation, whether it's a weak hock that they can't push off of. So they get sore behind, and then once they get sore behind, they put too much weight in front. Or a light-boned horse that was able to hold up and get to the 2-year-old sales, but now that you're asking them every time you get the horse up to a half mile at buck shins. I mean, I've had a horse actually once, luckily when I trained, shins were not a problem in our barn. We prepped horses in a certain way once they came in the barn that we rarely ever had a horse buck a shin, but we did have one that bucked his shins 3 times. He bucked him at 2. We gave him time off. He bucked him again at 3. We gave him time off, and we gelded him, and we brought him back at 4. He bucked him again slightly at 4. And then all of a sudden, as we started training that horse and we got him through the 4-year-old shin process, he then started having bony issues in his knee. So that was just a horse that had bony problems. Did he make it to the races? Yes. Did his bony issues that held him back from being the horse he could have been? Absolutely. So I'm looking for confirmation and sturdiness and strength at a 2-year-old sale that will help me understand that if I'm going to spend the money that it costs. And here's the biggest thing at a 2-year-old sale, and you can throw any stat at me and say, well, this horse was less, this horse was less. If you want a good horse at a 2-year-old sale, don't come with a budget any less than $150,000. Most of these horses were bought as yearlings for upwards of $50,000. They're not going to let a good horse go, especially if it's a solid horse. They're not going to let it go for anything less than $150,000. So you need to understand that if you want to walk in with a good horse that you can, meaning you can win a maiden special weight, potentially an allowance, and maybe have a chance at a stake, you need $150,000. Otherwise, you could potentially be spending a lot of money to have a very good claiming horse. So that's one thing that I try and look at in terms of when we go back to the barn. The horse needs to have a frame that I know will hold up to the rigors of racing and training. The biggest thing with a 2-year-old sale, and this is where you separate the men from the boys, okay? 2-year-old sales, you're getting to see these horses in front of you. And as I discussed previously, time does not matter. It's how the horse breeze. And when I mean separate men from boys, I mean people who know race horses. There are a lot of agents out there who can buy you a horse that don't know race horses. When I mean race horses, somebody who's honestly watched horses train and race and be in training scenarios where they understand what a good breeze looks like and what a bad breeze looks like. I've had plenty of horses put in fast works in my training career. They were terrible works. The horse went fast, but he did it so inefficiently that it was a waste of time. So understanding that different surfaces are going to lend to certain types of horses. We never saw it. He won the Kentucky Derby and he was taken down. But if you go back and you watch Medina's Spirit's Breeze at OBS, that horse traveled more smoothly over that synthetic track than he ever did over a dirt track. And he was obviously a good enough horse. He could win grade ones on dirt. But in my opinion, I think if you gave that horse a shot on the grass, he would have been phenomenal. His father was a grass horse. To me, that horse looked like he would have been a solid grass horse. So at OBS, if you see a horse that moves beautiful over the synthetic, there is a chance that that horse might actually be a grass horse. Now, good horses are going to move over any surface well, regardless when it comes to those distances. When you see horses going half miles and 5/8 and they look a little ragged at the end of their work, that's because they're on the wrong surface typically in those training scenarios and environments. But at a breeze show, most horses look pretty good. Most horses can handle it if they're a talented horse. So you might not miss a dirt horse because it was on the synthetic, and you might not miss a grass horse because it was on the dirt. They're there. You just have to understand that a higher knee action on the dirt and maybe a little bit more head movement will be more or less a horse that might want the turf. A horse that seems to not get over a surface as smoothly as a different horse on a synthetic, but still gets over it well enough, might point to that horse is potentially a dirt horse. So this is a big thing that you need to understand when you go to OBS. Most of these horses are training on sand tracks in Florida, okay? They're not training on synthetics. So their breezes over these synthetics, yes, they'll go over there and they'll trial it out every now and again before the breeze show. They'll do kind of dress rehearsals over those tracks. But for a lot of them, it's their second work, third work over that type of surface. So it's still new to them. A good horse stands out. You'll find good horses at those sales, but in terms of what surface and if you could miss a horse or you use those breezes to help you find the good horses. When they get into training and the trainer calls you and says, hey, look, I worked him 5/8 on the dirt and he can't break 102, but he was okay and he could do 48. And that's potentially saying, hey, you know what? His breeze at OBS was great on synthetic. Now he's on the dirt. We have him almost ready to run and he can't catch a shadow. You've got two questions. He's either slow, he's not that good, or he's a grass horse, so you actually need to put him on the turf and see what the horse can do.